Welcome, everybody. We're in the kitchen with Adam Dedeaux. We'll give everybody a minute to get settled, and then we'll get started talking about timing today. And timing could mean a couple different things in football. We'll explain exactly what we're talking about and exactly why it's important. Adam, how you doing?
Great, Luke. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Doing well.
Welcome to the East Coast, Adam.
Good to be here. Good to be here. A little chilly here, but not bad tomorrow.
Yeah, it's not California.
No.
Adam, thanks for coming back again. Today we're talking about timing. So far we've talked about overall mechanics, we've talked about footwork. Now we're actually getting into some of the mechanical variables and some of the stuff that you and Tom really stress if you were going to work with you in person. Nitty gritty stuff. So let's get into it. What is timing to you? More importantly, maybe what isn't timing to you? And I'll stop that question there, and we'll dig into it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about the outline of the class and understanding the distinction of what timing is in football, and then also for us from a mechanical standpoint when we're evaluating athletes and throwers, timing meaning a completely different thing for them. Obviously, timing is huge in football in terms of, we talked a little bit last week about your footwork marrying to concepts, and the timing of everything needs to all match up. A lot of playing the position is timing based. But for us, when we're evaluating just throwers, when I first got with Tom, he just hammered down the point that start with timing, because when we look at variables across the board, and if guys have mechanical errors, one of the first things that we have to understand and look at is their timing, because a lot of things can be solved just by going, in some cases, faster. More times than not, it's going faster. Rarely are we slowing guys down. I mean, we always talk about force equals mass times acceleration. So how fast you're going matters in terms of force generation or power generation, however you want to say it. And that's so important just for athletes in general. Pitchers, we talk about timing. But for quarterbacks, the goal is to get rid of the football as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So it's not just about, for pitchers where maybe they can be a little slower down the mound because they're kind of on their own time. Hypothetically, the new pitch clock that really has nothing to do with the timing. But for quarterbacks, sometimes it's like almost to a fault we're trying to get rid of the ball so fast. Other times we have in a clean pocket, which you've played plenty of football to know. How often do you have a clean pocket where you're just stepping into a throw with no bodies around you and no, timing mishaps or anything? I mean, if you throw the ball 30 times, you're probably lucky if that happens 4 or 5 times in a game.
The game is so easy when you can do that. It's
Yeah.
So easy.
And that's that is the thing about, at least in off seasons when we're training quarterbacks, that one of the hard things is always simulating the timing of a pocket and a play and everything. But when we're videoing everything and when we're looking at their timing, we're holding them to a standard on every rep to make sure that they're getting rid of the ball when they commit to seeing where they want to go with the football, making sure that they are getting rid of it in the proper time frame, so that, it doesn't just turn into a driving range of going out there and, just kind of loosely moving and kind of moving slowly, because it's not realistic. I mean, there are mechanical variables that could be true at a slower pace given our model and pitchers because they are not getting tackled. Don't have bodies around them. So could you do it slower with a football? Sure, maybe. But the truth is, we developed our timing model honestly by looking at what the best we're doing at the highest level. And we had about 35, 40 NFL guys in a motion analysis. And we were kind of able to arrive at some numbers on kind of what the aggregate, what these guys were doing who have a good sense of timing for the pocket and foot strike and getting rid of the football. And that's kind of where we started to develop the model. And then over time, as we've measured and looked at everybody from youth to high school to college to the NFL, you kind of understand, like, you know, this is a realistic time. We call it first forward movement, or once you've made your decision, and which is kind of arbitrary. It's not the easiest thing to see. So it's kind of, as it pertains to an athlete, of when you kind of identify some, where they've decided where they're going with the football. Historically, you see on TV, they'll look at, like, when the hands break is when they'll start the clock. I think that's a little bit muddled because guys break their hands at different times. And I don't think that's really showing when they've made that decision, when they've started their body towards a target. I don't think it's when they patted the ball or when their hands separate that is true. So we look at more first forward movement, or when they really, you can tell that they are committing to where they're going with the football is when we're starting.
And is that first forward movement of, like, the front foot, or how do you really start that clock?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the throw, right? So, it's identifying whether it's on a plant throw, whether it's on a hitch throw, and then also, not to make it too complicated, because sometimes on plant throws, guys' feet will get closer together than normal. They're not in their normal base. And a hitch, they might get a little bit closer together. So I look at kind of when they are in what would be their consistent base. And then, I'm kind of looking at when their front foot starts to go, but more also, I mean, I'll look as far as, like, when their back calf starts to flex. And when I see that they're putting their back foot in the ground and they're committing to going somewhere, that's when I'm starting that clock.
Okay.
But it's a little bit arbitrary depending on the drop. I don't like to start it if their feet are, they're in the middle of a crossover and then they quickly are committing.
Yeah.
But generally, I would say it's going to be somewhere where their feet are around their shoulder width, or just outside, similar to where their base would be. And as they begin to track forward is when I'm starting that clock.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I kind of like the distinction that you made of, like, haven't made a decision versus have made a decision. And I think that that's probably the, like, biggest difference of the timing that most people talk about in football and the timing that we're talking about. A lot of times when you hear timing, that's kind of like, it has to work within the play. Like, the ball has to get out in a certain amount of time from, like, when you've taken it under center to getting into the receiver's hands. And more what we're talking about is, like, during your actual mechanics, is the ball getting out in time? The decisions on where you're going with the football, hugely important. And that's stuff that's outside the realm of mechanics. That's more, you've got to get with your coaches, you've got to watch film, you've got to know the playbook inside and out. And we're really talking about that mechanical part. So what is the timing that we're looking for on that mechanical part?
Yeah. So, I'll start at the top, because I think a lot of especially like our high school guys or some higher level guys, they kind of want to be held at the gold standard, which is what we would expect to see with an NFL guy. The aggregate, let's just say average NFL release time is going to be in that 0.42 to 0.43 number. There are guys who the fastest I've seen in games is like 0.33, 0.34, 0.35. You know, and you even see that sometimes on those broadcasts where you'll see a guy get rid of it in 0.32. I've never seen anybody do it faster than that based on the model. I'm sure you can cheat it if you wanted to, but in realistic, like we're working on this, we're trying to be like in that 4.2 or less, 4.3 or less. High school, you know, like I said, we try to hold these guys to a high standard of 0.44 or less, 0.45 or less. And then you start getting into, hey, immediately if we're clocking you and you're 0.45 or more, you're slowing the foot strike for me. Younger kids can get away with a little bit more because they need that in terms of strength, but we're always working on trying to go faster. More times than not, if they're slow, it's going to have to do with foot strike. The foot strike's slow, the delivery tends to be slow. You see guys sometimes who have really quick upper bodies that make up for a slower foot strike, and technically they're in time. So, you know, we don't hammer them on it. But yeah, if we're trying to speed up the delivery, assuming, you know, our arms are inside 90 degrees. I mean, you see some guys whose mechanics have been not so great upper body wise, they might get long with their arms, but I've always kind of believed that the arms are going to match the tempo of your lower half. So if your foot strike gets down quick, you're far less likely for your arms to get outside 90 degrees. And we'll talk about that, you know, on another class. But you know, guys who've struggled in the league mechanically tend to be long, whether it be with their throwing arm or their front arm. Might be one reason from a mechanic standpoint. You know, I can think of a few. But again, I go back to foot strike. If that foot strike is slow, you know, I think what goes on is, yeah, the upper body starts to get long. You start to telegraph. DBs are starting to break on you a little bit more. So for a lot of different reasons, yeah, we want to be, you know, if, yeah, like I said, NFL guy, 0.42 or less. And then some guys, you know, when it's the off season, it's like, these are the types of things you want to work on. Like, okay, yes, my delivery is fast enough, but can I make it faster? And how do I do that? How can I be faster and more efficient? Because, hey, I'm looking at my line this year and I'm just seeing the fact that it's not going to be like it was in years past. And I want to have some tricks up my sleeve, much like a basketball player. You know, NBA playoffs are on, so I'm watching a lot of that right now. And I just look at guys like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson who can get rid of the ball at the 3-point line, and they don't need a lot of space. They don't need a lot of time. They just have figured out and practiced and worked on how quick and efficient can I be getting rid of the basketball. Similarly for quarterbacks, especially on shorter throws where, you know, I tell guys in football, quarterbacks in general, like, you got to have a catalog of throws that every delivery is not the same, and not all of them are going to be this time frame. You know, you're throwing a short little stick route or a shallow or an over the ball or a flat route. You know, we got to work on how quick we can get the ball out and push that tempo. I always say that to guys, like, hey, challenge yourself. Sometimes it's, and I've seen the analogy in golf where they talk about like swing hard and work on swinging hard and focus on where the ball goes later. Because if you want to learn how to develop club head speed, you got to swing hard to try. And, you know, or in baseball, sometimes off the mound, it's, you know, at some point you got to work on velocity if you're going to go high up. And sometimes it's just throw it as hard as you can, and then we'll figure out how to control it, because that's how they draft nowadays. If you got 98, we're taking you. You may not be able to throw a strike, but as long as you have 98, we'll figure it out. Similarly for quarterbacks, like if we can figure out, you know, how much force can we put in the ball as quickly as possible, you know, and I mean, like in the off seasons when you're taking time to improve your game. When you're in competition, it's a different story. Obviously, it's far more about what you do, not necessarily how you do it. But it's something that we are always working on, even with the veterans in the league. I need new tricks. I need to be able to get rid of the ball faster. I need to feel comfortable throwing from different arm angles and getting rid of the ball fast. And a lot of that is just timing based.
Yeah, and good news for everybody on this call. First of all, if you don't have the football beta, email us. We'll make sure to get you on. You can test your timing in the app. Basically, the way we're doing it from the app is it is when your hands break, because that's pretty visible for us. And then when your shoulders start opening. The thing to really take note of, and I think what Adam was talking about a lot, was foot strike. When your shoulders start opening, your front foot should be in the ground. That's not something we're tracking in the app currently, but you should make sure to track it yourselves. What mistakes do you see when people are trying to go too fast? And for most people, they're probably going too slow, especially at the youth level.
Yeah.
And they're trying to quicken up, they're trying to do all these things. What are some common mistakes that you see when people are trying to rush, go too fast?
Probably the two biggest mistakes, when we try to get guys to go fast. Number one, they get very forward and they lose posture. So now their weight is very on their front foot and they have that power loss. And the other thing is when they go fast with their lower half, their chain gets disrupted and they tend to go fast with their upper half and they get out of sequence. And one of the teaches we talk about is like, we want to be aggressively relaxed from the ground up, meaning the further up the chain we go, the more relaxed we have to be. We want to be explosive from our lower half, but as we recruit that energy, you want to be relaxed with your upper body so that you don't foot trigger that front shoulder and lose all that power you've generated. So yeah, those two are the big ones that you tend to get forward and you tend to let that front side arm fly open because you're just telling yourself, go fast, go fast, go fast. And it's really, no. We're just going fast with our feet. We're getting our feet in and out of a drop or in and out of a hitch. We're not compromising our base. We're not compromising our weight distribution. And we sure as hell don't want to compromise our kinematic sequencing by ripping that front shoulder open. But those two by far are the most common where, we're not maintaining sequencing and balance.
Yeah, and I have it a little bit both ways where, I played high school and college without meeting you guys. And then once I met you and Tom, I learned everything you're telling me about now. And so I definitely struggled with, I was trying to get the ball out quicker. And some of the things that you're talking about. First of all, I didn't know that I had to get my front foot down before I started throwing. Maybe intuitively I knew it a little bit because I knew how it felt when I threw a good ball. But I definitely went through periods where my front foot wasn't getting down and I was trying to throw because I wanted to get the ball out, and I wanted to make sure to beat defenders, which led to me throwing a bad ball. So I think that's one thing that you're talking about. The other thing is definitely getting tight. When you're trying to go super fast, you get tight with your upper body. The only thing you can do when you get tight with your upper body is swing instead of, redirect and one thing that we talked about, direction.
Yeah.
It's really easy to lose direction when you get really tight. The other thing that a lot of folks don't, we don't really even think about it or talk about it, but it is really hard to throw, for me at least, if my scaps are pinched and I'm trying to release the football. Like when you release a football, you have to be totally relaxed in your upper body. Your arm gets totally extended. And the only way you can do that is if you're relaxed. If you're like, tight with the upper back and trying to release a football, it just doesn't happen. And I think that's another cool thing about the quarterback position is just like the amount of cool and calm under pressure you need. You need to be so calm that your upper body is relaxed
Yeah.
while 300-pound dudes are chasing you, you know, like it's a pretty unique thing.
Well, and there's no doubt, you know, I think about we use different analogies in sports in terms of how to stay relaxed. And, you know, I'll bring this guy up because he is going to be drafted and he's been with us since eighth grade, Bryce Young. And one of the first things that I remembered about evaluating him, and this just more talks about the relaxed thing and as it pertains to more sports, is I noticed that when he was throwing and we challenged him with like distance or whatever, the one thing I noticed right away is that his jaw never clenched. His jaw was always loose and his delivery was so fluid and he never muscled. And he was only in eighth grade. And I'm like, man, that's rare. Like you see guys clench and they yank and they pull, and hey, that's part of it. I mean, the best in the world do that. And this kid at eighth grade, his jaw was just loose, like a sprinter who just knows, hey, I'm a duck in water, man. There's a lot going on underneath, but up top, you're just keeping everything smooth. And we brought that up last week and with drops as well. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I try to tell guys like, hey, loose jaw, like let your jaw hang. It kind of helps relax a little bit, deep breath. There's different ways to do it, but it just came to mind because even when we had him throwing for distance where it's like, hey, I want to see max distance of the arm. I want to know where you're at right now from your knees, standing up, the jaw never tightened. And there's a reason why he makes certain throws look so easy. He never, and it goes for what you just said about demeanor in the pocket and when being able to remain calm and relaxed, even when it's late in the game. I mean, if anybody's familiar with Bryce Young, they talk about how games on the line, at least at Alabama, fourth quarter, that guy just marches down the field and never seems to get rattled. He's smiling, he's having fun with it. That's just kind of his MO. Like that's a gift, but I think it's also a somewhat learned behavior. And to that, I was just gonna say that, like, because you asked, like, what are the tendencies when you're trying to do that? And those things are real. That's why practice is so important and the nuance of these details. And it's so crazy because the quarterback position is so hard. There's so many responsibilities on you. And, the hardest thing for us to do is simulating, what that chaos looks like.
Right.
But the best in the world are able to put themselves in that situation. And even when it's just, say, me and him on the field with a receiver who's not moving out there, he's patterning the movement in real time. He's making sure that his behaviors are going to match what is going to be necessary in a game. And he's holding himself accountable to that because he knows, like, it does no good to go at a slower tempo. And then all of a sudden you get in a game. Like, that's what bothers me sometimes. I see kids just grooving balls in a workout, but they're a tick slow. And I'm like, okay, sweet. You're on the driving range. That's awesome. Now can we play in real time? Now can you push your timing to a point where it's not real comfortable? Because, hey, welcome to the game of football. Welcome playing quarterback. Like, your timing is always going to be different. So maintaining some mechanical efficiency when your timing is messed up, again, that's separate. But like pushing yourself in those, call it deep training periods, where it's like, I know the time frame I've got to operate in. It feels uncomfortable now, but it's sink or swim. I either learn how to throw in time or, you have a very low ceiling.
Yeah. And, that's one thing I answered a question in Discord last week about it. After our call, somebody said, what should a practice plan look like? What does my warm-up look like? What are my route trees? What like drops do I match with different throws and stuff? And the most important thing is exactly what you're saying, which is go game speed. You need to get used to it. When you're throwing a simple hitch to the right in your route tree. What's the play? What's the play call? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. You got it from your coach. What defense are they in that led you to this route? And then throw it like it's a game. Because if you don't get used to it, then you're not going to be used to it.
No doubt. And know where your eyes need to be. Like,
Right.
you're not going to stare down a receiver. Like, know where your eyes and this, hey, they're going right to this defender, and then I'm peripherally seeing that receiver. I mean, there's all sorts of habits that, again, because there's only so much you can simulate. Some of this is about the athlete himself and the coach holding each other accountable.
Yeah. I also learned pretty early on exactly what you're saying. If my receiver wasn't where we had practiced and where I expected them to be, we had problems. Then it
Yeah.
starts getting hard to find people behind linemen and stuff like that. You really need to know where they are. And for quarterbacks out there, you can really drill that into your receivers. No, I don't expect you at 7 yards on a hitch. I expect you at 5.
Yeah.
And they need to be there. That's for a different day. Some guys throw different routes, especially like when it comes to the red zone and you really need to get the ball out quickly. Their front foot will never leave the ground. Do you how do you timing on that stuff, and do you have any keys for those types of throws?
Yeah, I mean, I do say to guys, depending on the concept, and depending on the drop. But we talk about when we get in the red area, it's a shrunken space. Everything's happening faster. There's a lot of bodies in a much smaller space, so our reaction time has to be even better. I think I saw somebody ask the question, and this kind of leads into it. I'm sure we'll answer it later, but sometimes I tell guys in the red zone to widen their base, because it's going to shorten the step if there is going to be one, which is going to quicken our release time. I think one of the questions is, and I get it a lot, like wide base versus narrow base. And we can talk about that at the end. But to answer your question, in the red zone, yeah, we're trying to eliminate as much of the lower half as we can so that we can get the ball out quick. And like I said, the faster the foot strike gets down, the upper body mechanics are going to remain pretty consistent. It's understanding, the lower half once we get that foot down. Once that foot gets down, we have a pretty good idea of what the delivery time is going to be. So I do instruct sometimes with the higher level guys, like, hey, we're going to go a little wider base in the red area, knowing ball's coming out quick. And, then it becomes about posture, making sure we're recruiting, using torque, things of that nature. Is that what you meant by the left foot never leaving the ground?
For sure. Yeah. I think exactly like you're talking about. A lot of guys will widen their base. Then you'll see guys, they'll have the wide base and they'll kind of just fling it from there, with their feet.
Yeah, it can be more of a, you see guys, sometimes they'll retreat in the pocket a little bit, kind of becomes a back foot throw, trying to keep their feet in the ground, knowing they're not going to be able to just step into throws, and nor do you need to in terms of distance. Now, velocity, but again, that's something you work on. Like,
yeah,
you need to be able to throw off multiple bases and multiple strides,
right. And for those types of throws, what is the key? Is it just having the front foot in the ground before you start your shoulders rotating?
To eliminate time, yeah, the faster the foot gets down. But then, what is the key? The key to me, when all of a sudden the delivery timing gets sped up, right? What you asked the question earlier, what do you see as the common problem? Well, it's the difference between rushing, right, or being quick but not hurried. Is, what are the natural tendencies for guys who are rushing all of a sudden, or they get their foot down? Okay, now what? We talk about, and we do this. I mean, all these things we work on, and like patterning, like how quick can we rotate with our upper body, but not yank our head to do it, or not pull our left side to do it. Like how quick can we be? And, a good exercise, we do it with the towel, like, just how quick, working speed. How quick can we rotate our upper body once our foot's in the ground, have our chest at our target, and get to full extension with the football? We start with a towel just so they have that feeling of what it feels like to go fast, and then put the football in their hand. And then maybe back to the towel. So we're just getting a feeling, a sensation of like, all right, this may not be how I started my day, like my lightning quick deliveries, but I want to train how to go faster. And yes, in that area, all right, we're going to go wider base, foot strikes down. Now we want to work on how quick can I rotate but not lose efficiency. And that's, the things that creep up. We lose posture, meaning our chest may collapse or our head yanks, our front shoulder might fly open, and we think we're moving faster, but now we're running from our arm.
Right.
And it's not necessarily faster. And we might lose, ticks on the velocity, or accuracy may suffer. It's a behavioral thing that can be trained and worked on. But yeah, it's part of the nuance of the game. I think that, like, we talk about, hey, my natural delivery may be a 0.41, but shoot, today I want to work on how fast can I get rid of a football, and what does that feel like? What did I have to do that? And, was I in control? That's kind of the question I do like to ask guys, is when we're working these, like, hey, this is just about speed. I call it A to B drills. Like, we are getting the ball from A, you, B, the receiver. We may not really care if it's a perfect spiral, but it needs to be accurate. It needs to be out fast. And yeah, ideally a decent velocity, or the necessary amount of velocity. So then it's like, all right, we're really pushing tempo. And something may be efficient enough. But my question is, were you in control? Did you get lucky? Could you have placed it there? Did you place it there? Were you in control when the ball was coming out? And sometimes it's like, not really. And like, no, I felt good. I felt it off my hand. I felt like I was in control. And it's like, well, that's good. That's about the fastest delivery you've ever had. And now we're not losing control. So, again, I think it's important for coaches to design periods where it's like, hey, this is an A to B period. This is a survival red zone. Like, we are just trying to get the ball from A to B as fast as possible, ideally with some level of control, so it's predictable. And it kind of gives guys a permission to go fast and not obsess about spirals. Again, we're always trying to have that, but let me tell you something. You watch a game not from, and this, not from the stands. From the stands, everything looks like a spiral, but there's a lot of non-spirals going on in games because, again, and some guys are pure. I'm not saying it, but there are guys who get the ball to where they need to go. Sometimes being a little rushed, a little faster, but hey, it's accurate. It got there. And, there's some very, very talented, accomplished guys in the NFL who told me, Adam, it's about being fast and accurate when bullets are flying, like fast and accurate. We work on efficiency here, and it is absolutely, the off seasons are built about how can I get better and how I'm going about my throwing. When I get in games, it's more about what I do and less about how I do it. And that, like,
Yeah.
So I think in what I'm just getting at is always good to be working on efficiency. But man, there's just so much importance on the timing part of getting rid of the football and putting it where it needs to be in time, that you need to give them permission to fail and learn how to go fast, and then learn how to control it. Because it will get better. It will get better. But if the only time you're pushing that threshold of how fast can I get rid of it is in a game, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's great advice just throughout the process of the play. So from, when you're taking a snap, I mean, even before it really in your processing, but once you take that snap and you're practicing, how fast can you get from point A to point B. Especially push it in practice. Once you're able to process everything that's going on in practice and see how quickly you can get rid of the ball, that's when the game starts slowing down. Once you know what to expect and get a sense of what to expect and know what it really feels like to get rid of the ball a lot quicker than you think possible, as soon as receivers are turning around, you're just going to be a better quarterback for it. And that means being fast with all your decisions, but also means being fast into foot strike and beyond. I think we've got a few questions floating around. So let's start getting into questions a little bit.
All right.
So do you recommend a longer stride or for more ground force production, or a shorter stride for a quicker release? I know you answered this a little bit earlier, but
Yeah, I saw the question, so that's why I was kind of leading into it.
yeah.
Look, the goal is to create as much force in the shortest amount of time. So if I'm evaluating an athlete and they have a timing problem, meaning their foot strike is too slow, one solution might be to broaden their base. Now, the tendency with some guys, if that, and Drew Brees talked about it in the first class, because I remember one thing we identified, he was always a wide base guy, but as he got older, it was harder for him to generate the ground force. So we wanted to bring his feet in a little bit and not lose any timing on his delivery, because one of his gifts was how quickly he could get rid of the ball, along with accuracy and spin and everything else. But we needed to generate more. So we shortened his base by a few inches and then worked like heck to make sure it was still in time. So, Tom Brady is as he got older, it was a little bit wider, but you can look at clips where he was more of a narrow base guy, longer strider, big limbs, long legs, long arms guy. We had to work on timing with him. Like, hey, that's fine because it's super efficient, but we got to be able to do that in a shorter amount of time. And I mean, that guy takes on a challenge better than anybody you can possibly imagine in terms of challenging his timing. And that was a guy, when I pushed him on, like, okay, the fastest I've seen is like 0.33. You're at this. And I remember him saying, like, I'm going to throw the ball 1,000 times tonight in the mirror and tomorrow I'm going to have this mastered. But I think the answer is just identifying, if you have a guy who can be a little bit wider base and generate good ground force in a short amount of time, that's good. That's ideal, right? If he's really struggling with force, then yeah, you might have to lengthen that stride a little bit to generate more force. And then you're just working on timing. I think that, the answer to your question is go to timing. Like, that's why I think the really strong arm quarterbacks that are just God gifted with great arms, I think they should operate with a little bit wider base, not to the point where they lose athleticism, but because it would just help. I mean, and I watched Josh Allen, and I've never worked with Josh, but man, that guy, his base got a little bit wider and he can just flick the ball over the field, and he gets rid of it so quickly because he's not striding nearly as far as he did as a rookie. I think if you got the gift of really strong arm, one way to tighten the delivery down is a little bit wider base, shorter step. We're going to get the foot down faster. Now our delivery can start. So I think it's case specific, really look at timing and force and then find that marriage. And I think the feedback from the athlete is huge. I mean, I always I don't want a cookie cut. It's got to feel, something that they can do. But I'm always trying to marry best timing with, most efficient force generation.
Mm-hmm. And then how early in the motion should your momentum start to come forward? Because we talk a lot about staying back, staying balanced.
It's really hard to resist not coming forward. Ideally, when should you start weight shift? Ideally, you're starting weight shift right away, because that is going to be quicker than staying back, putting your foot down, and then weight shifting. I think in a vacuum, you'd say that's kind of what it should look like. I think it's more just, hey, you want to move quick with that weight shift, right? Which, call it 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 to 12 if you got a longer stride. Uh, I just be more paying attention to where that weight ends up in the foot strike. Like when you start weight shifting is one thing. Ideally, we start right away because hey, we're moving towards our target, but we got to make sure that weight is behind the midline into foot strike.
Yeah.
In football, we do get forward. That's another discussion because you do need to learn how to throw with your weight forward. There's just too much variance in the pocket that to say we're always going to land, just behind the midline. But I think you want to train going forward, pretty quick, but being disciplined how far forward you get before foot strike.
Yeah, definitely for me, it was get my front foot in the ground. My weight's still back. It's probably 80% on my back foot still. And then, once the hips go, then you're starting to go forward.
Yeah. And that's understanding that in a vacuum, that position you want to be in absolutely is a good place to start. Like you want to feel your left foot for a right hander in the ground and then feel your back leg drive your momentum towards your target. You want to feel that. Absolutely. When your weight's traveling before your foot strike a lot, it gets ugly in a hurry. So, I think it's always good to kind of feel that left foot in the ground and then feel your weight start to come forward.
Mm-hmm. And then does going fast always, this is a great question. Does going fast always equal max throwing effort as hard as you can, or can you be fast and work on touch also?
Absolutely. It's something we work on all the time. Well, it's absolutely that going fast needs to be driven, also needs to be touched. Going fast does not necessarily mean it's max effort. Absolutely not. I would say more times than not, those times that we're putting our foot down fast is, we are throwing with anticipation. We are throwing the ball to space, which is more than likely going to be more touched than driven. And that, how to create a touch pass with fast feet is going to be control of rotation. That's like really understanding the force output part of your body, that what generates force, how much momentum we're putting into the throw from a ground force perspective, torque perspective, how fast we're rotating our body. And then are we able to decelerate our arm at the right appropriate time without slowing down our arm? And that's a very, again, nuanced thought that we don't really want to be slowing down our arm in the delivery. You see guys guiding balls. You see them I don't want to accelerate too fast. There's a fine line between being able to go fast and accelerate your arm, but not have all of that energy go up the system. There's kind of like a blocking mechanism that kind of reduces the energy to make sure that I can touch the ball. And again, something that's worked on. It's a nuanced part of the game. But to answer your question, no, the timing more times than not, and it's something that it gets worked on. Guys, they'll be 90% through their delivery, meaning their their hands have already separated, and the drill might be give me touch driven as I'm accelerating the ball. And at that point, again, this is NFL. I'm not saying that a high school kid should have to be able to do this, but it's good to work on. They're like, when I get to this point, tell me touch driven. I want to hear it so late so that I'm working on, okay, how do I accelerate or decelerate in the right way? Without compromising time. We can't compromise time. There's a reason we're getting rid of the ball fast. Most likely somebody's in our face or a window is closing. So that's a nuance. It's a great question. You need to be able to do both. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's what I was saying earlier about with pitchers. I know Tom is always, hey, GFF, we're going as friggin' fast and down the mound as we can go. It's best for force. Because pitchers are going to throw the ball pretty damn close to as hard as they can every time. Quarterbacks, it's a little different. You want to be fast, but you got to be able to have drive and touch.
Yeah. And here's a little secret they don't tell you. Guys are way more open right out of the break. So if
Anticipation.
you can, yeah, if you can get rid of the ball before the rush gets there, with a little bit of touch before the receiver's out of their break, that's better. Adam, thank you very much. Can't wait for next class. If anybody has questions, please ask away on Discord. I'll be in the Discord making sure I'm answering questions. Yeah, Adam, thank you again. That was a great class.
Great. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.